both of you, and forgive my ignorance with this, but if you become the commissioner of District 6, what would your staff look like? Are you allotted X amount of staff members? Like, for instance, the young lady alluded to a pothole that's reported to your office, and you delegated to someone to follow up. And as Jorge mentioned, a lot of times in government, it gets set aside and it's out of sight, out of mind, and there's no follow-up. So if you are to be graced with our commission in District 6, what type of staff would you have for these very issues? The system, I'm sure, would be reporting back to you and follow up and making sure it gets done. But what are your resources, number one? And number two, related to crime, I previously lived in North Gables for a number of years, and there was quite a bit of crime specifically related to Southwest 8th Street from Lejeune to 47th Cortez, and across that neighborhood coming into our neighborhood. And when those crimes increased, Coral Gables did some very proactive things. It didn't seem like big things, but they really helped. For instance, one thing was that the police would drive around with their lights on, not flashing, but they wanted to be seen. They didn't want to hide and say, aha, I caught you, let me get you. They were out, parked, different areas with their top lights on. So they were very proactive in saying, hey, don't come here because we're policing. Number two, they put police officers on golf carts. I'm sure you probably knew about this because we had a lot of meetings with Officer Fleetfoot, wonderful officer. But they would come around with golf carts with lights on the top of the golf cart, and consistently in areas where the crime was increasing, they would consistently show up and be cruising down the streets. Like in our little neighborhood, our little pocket of Glenvar Heights, my God, I think that would be amazing if, with the recent crimes that we've had, from mail issues to firearms being shot in the air, to our poor lawn keepers their tools being stolen on a regular basis. My God, it kills me. They work so hard. Menial things that might not seem big, but they're big to us. To be able to have, if you're not gonna have a police car, maybe we could have a couple of officers or even security, whatever it may be, on golf carts, just showing their face through the streets of our neighborhood, because the crime in our neighborhoods typically occur from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock a.m. This is the way that I've seen it. I don't know if you all feel the same way, but that little pocket, it could even be from 1 to 4, but no, usually not past 4 a.m. And it doesn't usually start till after 1 a.m.
Yeah.
So that
They
time,
typically clock in at about 2:30 a.m.
yeah, it's that bewitching hour, I call it, where, and this is consistent in our neighborhood. So A, if you could answer the staffing issue that I brought up, and B, what would you implement right away for our Glenvar Heights area to show proactive means of deterrent rather than reactive?
Definitely, I think the suggestion that you're making, because crimes are recorded by the police, right? They know where the problem hours are, the problem times. So a deterrent type of situation where you may not have a police car, but you have some presence on a regular basis, I think that's probably doable. I mean, that's a conversation between the watch, the commissioner, the captain, about that kind of particular, what I call the broken window syndrome, right? And if people think that you can get away with something at a particular time, they're gonna come back because there is no deterrent. Now, I am not totally familiar with the staffing issues of the offices because, and maybe George knows a little more, but there are staff and then there are pools of staff depending on the different kinds of situation. But clearly, I'd like to have staffing in my office focus on parts of the district, so that there's a direct staff person, or contact person for the areas in the southern part and so forth, to be able to get that information. But I think that whether it's a golf cart or any other type of deterrent in those sweet spot for the bad guys, is probably gonna have an impact.
Staffing wise, I also intend to assign specific people in my office to specific areas, so there's some accountability, because again, the way I like to do is follow, and I hear a temperature map of which tasks have not been accomplished for X amount of time and are starting, and everybody in the office kind of sees it so that they know when nobody wants to see their task turn red, etc. But there's gonna be a specific staff member, and for some areas, 2 staff members specifically assigned to certain areas, so there's accountability. Staff, I believe there's a budget to hire about 12 to 14 staff members per commissioner office. And there's 2 ways to skin that cat. You can hire all 12 to 14, or you can try to hire less of them, but more qualified people who you pay a higher salary to. I've considered bringing in somebody with former law enforcement experience, who will sort of be my go-to person in my own office, with not only suggestions and a focus on public safety and policing, but something that's even more important than that, is that they know people at the police department, right? That's what really gets things done. And when you have a giant staff, especially one like the county, you can call to fix a pothole, or you can call to get an extra patrol in an area, but a lot of times it depends on who calls and who they call. For that very same reason, Commissioner Sosa has been a commissioner for 22 years. She has people in her office that have been there for a very long time. I think it would be a critical mistake to clean house with that entire staff, especially at the outset. You can't bring in a bunch of new people into that staff who don't know anybody at the county. They're gonna be walking around not knowing even where the bathroom is. So I intend to keep certain key members of her staff at least for the first year, so those relationships that those people have at Public Works, when they really need a pothole fixed, they know they call Jerry, and they know that Jerry always, they have a relationship, and that Jerry's actually gonna go do it. And they can text Jerry later on and see if he did it. So that those relationships can be slowly handed off to newer members of the staff. And we don't lose any of those institutional relationships with staff, because staff at the end of the day is its own monster, and you really have to be able to have a good relationship, I'll put it that way. I mean, if staff does not like you, a lot of your requests, even as an elected official, are not going to be completed, and you won't even be able to understand or know why, because it's such a monster of an apparatus that is the county staff. Even I consider Coral Gables to be one, and it's a fraction of the size of county staff. And immediate, next day improvements to policing and public safety. The commissioner is not obviously in charge of the police, is not in charge of operational, but obviously is in a position, like I said earlier, to have their ideas heard sooner. So what I would do immediately would be to start, besides pursuing what I've already been discussing with them, which is a community model for those specific areas, is sit down and meet with them and start developing that relationship. Because when you develop that relationship, then they want to oversimplify it. I mean, you have to create a culture, like everything in life, where they want to make you look good. Or really, they want to make you, they want to see you deliver for your residents and fulfill the promises you made during your campaign. So I would come to them and, for instance, say, it would be really great if we could do what we did, some of the things we did in Coral Gables. Can you talk to our chief from Coral Gables to see how he did address petty crime when we had a little rash of it in the North Gables? I remember we did the police going around with lights. I remember we did the golf carts. Chief, can I put you in contact with my chief at the city of Coral Gables and see if we can do some of that in District 6, and not just anywhere, but in the areas, based on statistics, the places that are experiencing rashes of petty theft. I'm going to do that all in the district, if Glenvar is experiencing a rash of petty theft, then let's do it in Glenvar and see what happens, and let's check the map again later on. The heat map of crime instances. One last thing I wanna do, which I think I wanna explore at least, that we do in the Gables, is we have policies and procedures to increase the probability of prosecution of petty crimes in our city, so that if you do commit a petty crime in our city, you will get prosecuted for it, and hopefully you go and tell your friends not to go to Coral Gables, because you will get taken all the way to trial if you break a car window. It won't just fall in the frame. We do that. We hire prosecutors as outside counsel to basically stay on top of the state attorney's office, and make sure that our prosecution, that we try to convince them and lobby them to prosecute our cases all the way to the end. I don't think it's possible to do that in the entire District 6. It's way too big, but some kind of system where we can maybe do it in spots so that that culture is